Hey, what's up guys, welcome back to another League of Legends guide video. And in today's video, we're going to be doing a guide on Neeko. Now before we get into anything that's based on Neeko, like her abilities and builds and everything else, first you gotta note that Neeko is actually a high burst AP champion that snowballs a lot, and she plays a lot of mind games against the enemy. Now this guide will tell you everything about her, what kind of builds you can go, and how to play Neeko, also how to play against Neekos as well. And this is used for information to understand how enemies will outplay Neeko as well. So firstly, we're gonna get into Neeko's abilities, and I'm gonna read them as how League of Legends put them for the champion to show nothing has been changed, and that is originally the information about the champion. All we do is go through an analysis on it. So let's start with Neeko's passive, which is Inherent Glamour. Neeko is offered a selection of allied champions to take their appearance. Once selected, there's a 2.5 second delay before another champion can be selected. Whilst disguised, Neeko can use basic attacks against non-champions while keeping her form, starting a basic attack against enemy champions, or taking damage from them, or even casting either Bloom Burst or Tangle Barbs, breaks the illusion and puts Inherent Glamour on cooldown. And that's talking about her Q and E ability. So the selection of disguises she gets is obviously the allied champions that she's paired with. So she can transform into any of them, which is used to make the mind games of the champions. Now, how you have the stacks for Rengar, when you have the indication on the bottom right, for Neeko it also indicates the same, but instead you can click on one of those, so you can disguise into an allied champion. Then we'll look at Neeko's Q, which is Blooming Burst. Neeko propels a seed into a target area, dealing magic damage to enemies within. If the seed kills an enemy unit, or damages champions or large monsters, it will bloom again after a short delay, to deal magic damage. This cannot happen more than twice per Blooming Burst. So once throwing your seed and you kill a minion, it will bloom 2 more times, so it blooms in the total of 3 times. And the same applies for large monsters and enemy champions. Then we'll look at Neeko's W, which is Shape Splitter. Neeko resonates with spiritual energy, every third basic attack against non-structures, dealing bonus magic damage and granting her bonus movement speed for 1 second. When activated, Neeko becomes invisible for half a second, sending a temporary clone for her current form, sprinting in the direction for 2 seconds and up to 900 units away. Both Neeko and the clone gain bonus movement speed for 2 seconds. Now the clone for Shapesplitter will apply even when you're cloning into somebody else, so it looks like there's multiple of that champion going ahead. You can also combo this a lot as well to make it look like that there's more than one champion that are unique within bushes, which really helps for ganks and also for scaring the enemy. This ability is mostly used for making mind games against your enemy as well, sending off the clone and yourself into multiple directions so that they have to pick between which of the clones to attack. And this would usually happen in a fast-paced situation, only because the clone does not last long like a Shaco clone. When you're casting W, it will move towards where your mouse is, especially when you have quick cast on, so you can pick the direction for the clone to move while you move in the other way. The 0.5 seconds of invisibility helps you to reposition and to make you look like you're the clone that also has run off, because remember, the clone will only run in a certain direction that you point your mouse to. The clone can even go around corners, it depends. It's like League of Legends pathing when you're using your pathing. Let's say when you're about to come around a corner of a wall, if you cast your clone and you put your mouse on the area where it's supposed to go, it will move around to that direction, so it will not only go in a straight line, but if there's any turns or bends, the clone will take it if they have to. Then we'll look at Neeko's E, which is Tangle Barbs. Neeko slings a magical spiral in a target direction, dealing magic damage and rooting enemies it passes through for 0.5 seconds. The last champion hit is rooted for longer. If Tangle Barbs hits at least 2 enemies, it grows in size and speed, and the root duration against the last champion hit is further increased. Now this is most likely indicated like a Bard Q. Instead, it has to pass through 2 enemy champions first, but once it passes through those 2, it will speed up and hit the last target, making that Tangle Barbs last a lot longer. The root will go purple, and that will be an indication to how you know that it's a longer one. Then we'll finish off with the Neeko's ultimate, which is Pop Blossom. When activated, Neeko winds up over 1.25 seconds, creating a zone around her. The zone is invisible to enemies while she is disguised, so this indicates for when she is using her clone ability. The initial charge up is not seen by enemies. Neeko then shields herself for 2 seconds, increased for each enemy champion nearby, as she leaps into the air for 0.75 seconds, during which enemies are slowed by 40%. Upon landing, Neeko bursts with spiritual energy, dealing magic damage and stunning nearby enemies for 1.25 seconds. And just so you know, this ability does scale 125% AP from when this guide was currently made. Now that is pretty damn broken. So now that we've gone over the abilities for Neeko, we'll be moving over to her runes. And I'm going to show you 2 specific kind of rune pages, one that I highly recommend and one that I go most of the times. So the rune page that I mostly recommend is going with sorcery, going Arcane Comet, Mana Flow Band, Transcendence Scorch, and then going Domination Secondary with Taste of Blood, Ravenous Hunter, having 2 Adaptive Force mini runes and a defense rune of Magic resist, or armor. It just depends on your situation. Now, the reason you go Arcane Comet is because every time you land an ability or when an ability does damage each time, the cooldown for Arcane Comet is reduced. Now, Q can pop up to 3 times on its cast as long as a unit is killed or when an enemy champion is hit. And when it blooms up to 3 times, and if all 3 do hit on the enemy champion, that considerably decreases the amount of cooldown that's on Arcane Comet, bringing it back up again, which is why it's amazing to take Arcane Comet and is so good for the early mid game. Mana Flow Band is good because with Neeko, you want to be poking a lot, you want to use, and you're going to be using a lot of your mana as well, so you're going to expect low mana, especially when you're highly pressuring your enemy laner. So Mana Flow Band will help to sustain a bit of that mana, and then we go Transcendence because you want to get that early CDR as well as soon as you can, even though you are building max CDR with the AP items that you're going to be building, which I'll show you later. But even for building excessive CDR, you also get converted damage, and the amount of conversion you get from Transcendence is crazy. Then you can go Scorch or Gathering Storm, but in this case we're just going Scorch because it just highly makes up for the poking potential. Now, the reason I go Domination Secondary with going Taste of Blood and Ravenous Hunter is because Neeko does not have any sustain in her kit. And the only way to make up for that is either going Taste of Blood and Ravenous Hunter, or just taking a Summoner spell that just makes up for it. But no, I think it's the best idea to go Domination Secondary. The amount of healing you get from Taste of Blood and Ravenous Hunter does need max Bounty Hunter stacks to get the maximum healing. It does feel very, very rewarding. And it's kind of obvious why we go Adaptive Force twice, because you want to get all that damage off early game. You want to get that free extra AD or AP, because at the beginning of the game, of course, you're going to have a lot of AD, and you could just make up for that after when you're building AP, so that you get 20 extra AP, which is amazing. And then obviously for the defense runes, you want to go something that is more viable for you. Let's say if you're going against high AD or high AP. I know it's not going to make the biggest difference, but even a small difference does really help for the build. And then the rune page with I go with mostly is Dark Harvest, Sudden Impact, Eyeball Collection, Ultimate Hunter, with going Secondary Sorcery as Transcendence and Mana Flow Band, going the same with the mini runes. Now, the only reason a lot of people will be going Arcane Comet instead of Dark Harvest is because Dark Harvest obviously received a nerf quite a while ago. But the keystone is actually still useful. That doesn't mean it is the worst keystone in the game, or it's, you know, it's not viable for Neeko. I still think that Arcane Comet is a beautiful pick for Neeko. But the only thing is with Dark Harvest is that it provides a huge burst potential, because the best way to proc your Arcane Comet is by rooting the enemies using your E and then using your Q. But with Dark Harvest, you can just throw a Q and you can get a free stack off that as long as they're below 50% HP. Enemies are not always easy to hit when you're hitting your Q first or when you're doing your EQ, because your E does travel pretty slow when it doesn't travel between targets. And your first cast of your Q is actually pretty damn fast, so they will be caught off guard, and you are almost guaranteed every time to get yourself a Dark Harvest stack. Now, Sudden Impact can be used for when she exits the stealth mode that is on her W. And I only just picked this to show you that there is more of a variety to pick on her. But you can always go Taste of Blood as well, because remember, she does not have sustain. Eyeball Collection is explanatory. You get AD for taking down wards, and then go in Ultimate Hunter so you can frequently have your ultimate up. Yeah, you know that 125% AP scaling ultimate? Yeah, you can get that nearly all the time. Otherwise, you can go Ravenous Hunter once again. And then Transcendence and Mana Flow, I've already explained to why you go these, and then you go the Adaptive Force runes along with what kind of defense runes that you want to go for. But if you're looking to play Neeko for the first time and everything, I think it's best to go Arcane Comet. This rune page actually has one of the highest win rates so far on Neeko as she stands, and I think it's the best to go for this for now. And if you're feeling a little bit ambitious, just go for Dark Harvest or try something else as well. There are many varieties to choose from, but I think your Arcane Comet one is your best bet for now. So now we'll be talking about Neeko's builds before we go into anything more in depth about her, what lanes you can play her, and what her pros and cons are. Now, here are the build items that you can potentially go for Neeko. Now, one thing is to note that is Neeko can be played on multiple lanes, and the most common lanes that she has been played on, or the roles that she's been played on, is mid lane, support, and jungle. But so far, her most popular one is going to be mid lane Neeko. Doran's Ring and Darksteel are your generic start for going mid lane as an AP champion. Now, Doran's Ring is going to be more of a safe pick, while you get 2 more health pots on top of that. And Darksteel, I think, is more rewarding in the fact that you don't have to buy a lot of AP as long as you're getting kills and not getting killed as well, because you get rewarded with AP once you're killing people, and you get to start off with 3 pots and more mana than you would on Doran's Ring. Then when you go support, you want to go Spell Thief's Edge, considering it has a lot of AP, especially when upgrading it to a Frostfang. And then you want to go Hunter's Talisman if you want to go Neeko Jungle. And on your first back, you want to get a Lost Chapter, because because it has a lot of mana and AP to start off with, and you can build that into a Luden's Echo to begin with. You want to get boots as soon as you can, and if you're going support, you want to build your Spell Thieves into a Frostfang. When going jungle, you want to get your jungle item as soon as you can as well, and potentially get Runic Echoes with that. And I think Skirmisher Saber is actually really good for especially ganks and having to burst off a lot of damage on the enemy. And then when it comes to generic items that you can potentially build on Neeko, you want to get any of the boots from Ninja Tabby, Sorcery Boots, or Mercury Treads, depending on what the enemy team has. If they're really high in AD, of course you want to go Ninja Tabby. Otherwise, if they're high in CC or AP, you want to go Mercury Treads. And then Sorcery Shoes if you want to get more damage and magic penetration. Banshee's Veil actually provides a lot of magic resist and AP along with the spell shield that comes with it. Lichbane is good only because it works well, especially with her third auto attack that she gets with her passive of W, because that makes up for a lot of damage. Combining that with the Sheen damage is going to be crazy. The Hextech Proto Belt offers AP, CDR, and HP, which can add more damage to your combos. And it helps for gap closing as well. Morellonomicon giving you a lot of AP and Grievous Wounds, especially for champions against like Vladimir or something. You know, people that have a lot of healing. Void Staff and Rabadon's Death Cap are really good high burst AP items. And if you're getting good with your Dark Seal stacks, you can get your Medjais as soon as you can. And I think my most personal favorite in this list is going to be the Ryla's Crystal Scepter. Only because once you're casting your Q, it slows enemies and it can help pop off the second or maybe the third as well of the Q proc. Because it's not always going to be the case that you're going to land your E ability, or you could just go any of the other AP items that are in the shop that provide for high burst and for utility. And here's an example build for something that you would go on a high burst Neeko build. Everything here having the magic penetration along with the AP damage. Rabadon's giving you the 30% extra, and this is going to combine so well with your ultimate, only because Neeko's ultimate, remember, it does scale with 125% of AP, which is crazy. And that is as of this guide has been made, and I'm not sure if that's going to be nerfed or buffed or something. I don't think that will be buffed, don't worry about it. But going for something like this as a build really does synergize well with your ultimate along with your abilities in general. And it really does make up for Neeko's early mid game. Rabadon's will only help her stay in the late game because she's not the best within the late game of playing her. And then when you're going summoner spells, you want to always take flash, and you're either going to go smite for jungle and then you're going to go ignite or cleanse. The reason you want to go cleanse is because she has no mobility, so I think you're going to need that is in case you get CC'd. Otherwise, if you're going to get suppressed or knocked up or anything, it's not going to work for cleanse, so you might have to go a QSS instead. And ignite's a good option when you're going mid lane or support. Really good to use for Neeko's all-in as well. Now moving back over to Neeko's abilities when it comes to ability maxing. Well, at first you want to get your Q, E, and W when you hit level 1 to 3 and get your ultimate as soon as you can. You want to max your Q only because you get your main source of wave clear and poke from that ability alone. Then you want to max your E only because that's her only hard CC ability pre-6, and you want to get it as low as you can on cooldown so you can use it as many times as you can to root your enemies, and so you can combine it with your Q as well for the extra damage. Now the good thing about using Neeko's ultimate is, or when you're maxing the ultimate, is self-explanatory. Plus Neeko gets a bunch of damage off along with slowing nearby enemies and giving her a big shield to engage with that ultimate as well. This is what makes Neeko amazing in team fights. She can stun up to pretty much everyone on the team, and it's pretty much like a Nunu and an Amumu ult, maybe combined or on steroids. It's really crazy. And then you want to max your Shape Splitter last, only because this is a utility ability and doesn't have to be necessary to max over the other abilities, considering they're more useful, especially when the damage and their CDR is lower. This ability is only really used to confuse the enemy, so that's why you want to max this ability last, but it's still a very useful ability all in all. Now Neeko's early game is actually pretty damn strong, only because when she gets her Blooming Burst, it does like the 3 proc damage. It kind of reminds you a bit of a 3 Qs on Aatrox or a Riven, but of course it's going to do a little less damage than that, of course, because she is a ranged champion and she's going to be doing AoE burst, so she can hit multiple targets, which is also what makes her really good in the jungle as well. And when you go in support, she can provide so much poke on the enemies. Now, a lot of support champions do have problems with minions getting in the way of their abilities. With Neeko, that's no problem, only because her E does go through minions and can use the minions to root the enemy. Because remember, after the 2 targets it hits, it will will speed up to the next target and it will root them. So hopefully you can get minions in front of you and use them so that you can get the longer route onto your enemies, which is what makes it really, really strong in the bot lane. Because she has no minions to worry about to get in the way, because her Q always goes over and hits onto the enemies, with her E going through the minions. That's the same with her ultimate and her W as well. Her W will be dashing through the minions, like along with the clones, and her ultimate is just no problem and will just damage through anything. So minions are not really a problem to her. Her wave clear is pretty damn nice as well, especially when killing targets with your Q, which is what makes her early game pretty nice as well for wave clear. And considering this is already on a considerably low cooldown in the beginning as well, it's really good to use as poke. You want to use your Q and E as soon as you can, but of course you want to start off with your E first when you're engaging, and then you use your Q, because once they're tangled barbed into your E, they can't move and your Q is going to do a lot of damage. But of course you have to cast your Q as soon as possible, straight after your E. And make sure you always buy Lost Chapter as soon as you can, so you get a bunch of mana and AP damage, so you can use your abilities more frequently, and to get control wards as soon as you can, as well as control wards are pretty crucial for mid laners. The mid game is where Neeko really does start to pop off. And this is probably her main part of the game, because this is where she's doing a lot of damage, and she probably outscales a lot of enemies considerably due to her ultimate having 125% AP scaling. Now, nobody really gets that early on in the game. Like, nobody has that much amount of damage within the mid game. And this is what Neeko has, so you want to utilize that as much as you can. So you want to build your AP as soon as you can, so you can use your ultimate's damage. But that's not the main part. Your main part is probably going to be your Inherent Glamour passive, where you're moving around the map and you're roaming using the clone ability. Let's say you're about to gank bot lane, but what you are going to do is you're going to clone into your jungler while your jungler is on top lane, ready to gank the top laner. Now let's say your enemy does have sight of you. You can purposely give sight to them that you're on bot lane as your jungler, but once the top laner finds out, the enemy top laner, they will probably go all in on the enemy, realizing that the jungler that was truly there would go in behind and go engage on the top laner, while the one on bot lane was Neeko all along. Now this is how you can mind game your enemies. There are so many ways to mind game your enemies. There's even different combos to try to do that as well, and obviously I will explain those once we get into the combos. And you want to utilize your cloning and your mimicking ability as much as possible, because once you're a threat to the enemy and once you're really annoying to the enemy, it's really going to put them off, and I think it's going to make for good plays on Neeko as well. And make sure you know that when you're into a clone, the initial charge up that Neeko has on her ultimate is not shown to the enemy, but only when she jumps in the air and jumps back down, unless otherwise it will show the whole ability if she's not cloned into anyone. This is why disguising is really important with Neeko. Just bear in mind when taking damage or doing damage after cloning, it's going to go on quite a long cooldown. Oracle Lens and Control Ward are also important, so you can catch out wards before enemies find out that you've just cloned into someone as well. So I think you want to try getting rid of any vision you can on the map to make it harder for the enemies to find out if you truly are mimicking someone else or if you are Neeko. Now when it comes to Neeko's late game, sadly this is where the part where she begins to fall off. She still does a lot and decent damage to the enemy team, but you gotta be careful, because this could be the part where just the support and the enemy ADC could just kill you. Even if you mess up your combos at this point, especially when it comes to 1v1s or anything, I think it's gonna be really dangerous, only because other mages within the game actually scale a lot better within the late game, and they last probably one of the longest. Let's say for example Kassadin or LeBlanc, some mages like that. But with Neeko, sadly, it's only going to be her early mid game where she really begins to pop off. So this is where you have to make as many plays as you can with Neeko before it hits late game. But even if it does hit late game, you got to utilize her very carefully and not be throwing the game by just constantly dying after. Remember, one death even in a team fight could cost you the game, so you got to be very careful when it comes to this. But remember, her team fighting is really, really good. She's not entirely useless late game, she still is a really useful champion, and I think it's best to use your Shape Splitter as much as you can so you can confuse your enemies, along with using it to make some plays, making the enemy think that you are one of the other clones, so you just have to hope they haven't got you. And when you're engaging on the enemy, you want to make sure you have your flash up as soon as you can, so you can make up for the initial charge up for your ultimate, and then you can flash in on the enemy team and get them all in your stun. Now the only thing is, a lot of people do react and do flash out of Neeko's ultimate, so the best thing to do is try to get their flashes first before making any of these plays. Otherwise, you're just going to have to hope for the best and try to get all the squishies you can, because she considerably damages the squishies when it comes to team fights. But by the time everybody else is low and stunned, this makes up for your team to engage on them and so they can kill them. So this is more like helping your team entirely, because you're not going to be able to do everything alone when it comes to the late game, and you're going to have to help everybody pushing towards winning the game and making sure that you use your kit effectively. So that was Neeko's early, mid, and late game. That's initially what you can understand about her, and now we'll be going to her combos. Now, just before we end off this Neeko guide, I gotta talk to you about the pros and cons of Neeko. So when it comes to the pros of Neeko, she can pretty much mimic any champion, and this is what makes for mind games. She's really high burst in AoE and in CC, which makes her really good for team fights and for early damage. Her kit synergizes really well for when it comes to ganking, as minions will be no problem and they can be used actually to increase the root duration, along with putting your Q on top and letting your allies engage with that. Neeko's ultimate allows for good outplay potential, and Neeko can also be a serious lane bully, and this is most likely when it comes to mid lane and playing support with Neeko. Then when it comes to the cons of Neeko, she is quite very squishy and very vulnerable, so you have to play at a safe distance while you're casting your abilities, of course, hence why she is ranged. She also lacks escape abilities, which is why you're going to need to build something like a QSS or cleanse, so it's best not to be out of position with her. And when it comes to using her ultimate, she has to be close to her enemies to use it effectively, but it also puts her at a risk. But to avoid that, you can also build a Zhonya's Hourglass, because after doing your first cast of your ultimate and then casting Zhonya's will still carry on the ultimate, and it will do the stun and the damage, so that's a good thing to know when you're going Zhonya's Hourglass. Neeko does require good team coordination, so you gotta be careful about that, and like I explained before, she does fall off in late game, so you have to start revolving around your team when it does come to late game, or you have to start making all your plays early and mid game. And her abilities are not considerably large like when it comes to range, but it's at a decent range for you to engage your enemy, but they're also in a decent range to attack you as well, which is why it's pretty dangerous. So you gotta be careful about that when it comes to using her abilities. So that was pretty much it about Neeko. That was everything I could discuss, and if I've missed anything out, you guys can go put that in the comment section below on what other things that you think we could do about Neeko. If you want to extend on any information, you can go ahead and put that in the comment section below as well, and if you want any other recommendations or any other guides that you guys are wanting, then go ahead and also put that down in the comment section below. So anyways guys, thanks for watching. If you guys enjoyed this video, please leave a like, comment, and subscribe. If you guys want to see more videos like this, then go ahead and put it down in the comment section below. So anyways guys, thanks for watching, and I hope to see you guys in my next video. Peace guys, and see ya.